shoes, world on my shoulders, heart full of blues out in the dirt, down in the dirt. I've been a real bad boy on the town all night, starting to calm down with the morning light. I'm in the dirt, down in the dirt. Been real bad. I've been a real bad boy on the town all night, starting to calm down with the morning light. I'm in the dirt, down in the dirt, down in the dirt, down in the dirt, down in the dirt.
All right, we are live on this not so beautiful Thursday afternoon. It may be beautiful where you are. Here, it is just a rainy mess. All sorts of flooding out in the yard. It is dropping just buckets of water outside. So had a little bit of a power issue this morning. Hopefully that doesn't come back to bite us, because two things are needed for a live stream, and that is electricity and a good internet connection. So I'm just checking on all of the streams right now to make sure we are live. It looks like they all came up there. Gary Smith over on LinkedIn is telling me it looks like the opening credits from Justified. It's been a while since I've watched Justified, but you're right. That song kind of has that Justified feel to it. This is going to be an interesting stream. It's a different stream. I'm trying to figure out ways to make these things more useful, to maybe try to expand our reach, look for a bigger audience, and make them more interesting to myself, not just for everyone else. And so we bring a lot of partners on, a lot of people in e-commerce, and a lot of our viewers tend to be technical. They're developers. They work for some company that's in the e-commerce space. And, we want to try to make these more useful for merchants and not just tech partners. And part of that is not just preaching solutions, not just, having somebody come on and let's talk about how to build a marketplace, which is a fun conversation. We want to do some of those, but we don't want that to be everything we do. And so with that, this is born. And this is basically, let's find a merchant. Let's bring them on with no agenda. I have no idea what we're going to talk about today. I've prepared nothing whatsoever, which is great, makes it easier. But we're going to just kind of talk about e-commerce, what their thoughts are, what they're struggling with, what they're seeing in the space. Talk a little bit about their business, but there's a lot of fantastic merchants out there, and who knows better what they're dealing with and what they're struggling with than the merchants themselves. We act like we know, but very few of us have actually been in their position. So I am going to grab some whiskey here. I've grabbed this bottle here. This is Davidson Reserve, which is from Pennington Distilling Company in Nashville, Tennessee. This is actually a blend. It is a 4-grain Tennessee bourbon. I haven't tried it yet. I don't know much about it. Get that nice pop there from the cork. I'm going to pour myself a little bit here, and we're going to give it a try. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to lubricate the conversation with a little bit of bourbon, and then we're going to talk about e-commerce. Today's guest, and I appreciate any merchant. I've actually got 3 merchants. 3 out of my next 4 live streams are merchants, and I really want to thank those that want to come on and have this conversation, because it's tough, especially when we haven't done anything quite like this before. So I found a brave soul that wants to come on and be our first guest to have this type of conversation. And so I've got Jeff Vogl on from Classic Car Stereos. Jeff, if you would, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your business.
Hi. So like TJ said, my name is Jeff Vogl, and I own ClassicCarStereos.com. We specialize in car audio for classic cars, primarily vehicles 1987 and older, where like the radio looks like it's old. It doesn't look like the Vegas strip show in your dash, but you have all the modern technology, Bluetooth, auxiliary, etc.
And as always, this is, I guess it's not really a Q&A, but this is just kind of a live, active conversation. So, participate. We'll be kind of interacting with the chat, definitely getting your thoughts on these topics as we roll through them. So let me know. We are live on Twitter, Periscope, LinkedIn, and YouTube at the moment. So you brought your own bourbon there. What are you? See, you've got a much better selection than I can get a hold to here in Alabama. I'm having to just try. I'm trying some new craft stuff, and I see a bottle of Blanton's over your shoulder there behind you, like you've already outclassed me.
That actually was given to me as a gift, thanks to Rodney from Rockford. But today I am drinking Yellowstone. This is one of my favorites. Found it last year in Vegas. We went to the whiskey bar at the MGM and asked the bartender, "What do you drink here?" And he's like, "Well, I like this." And then, so we bought it at the bar, and then come to find out it's only like, at least in California, like $40 a bottle. So that's what I'm sipping on today. Cheers.
I've seen that bottle. I don't know if I saw it in a store, if I saw it online, and you're saying that's one of your favorites right now. Like, what about that do you like?
It's kind of unique. I know a lot of people love Blanton's. To me, to be in all honesty, it doesn't really do that much for me. It's a really solid bourbon, but I don't know, this Yellowstone has kind of a unique flavor, and for the price point and what you get, I don't think you can beat it.
I understand that. You save the blend. It impresses the guests, if nothing else, right? Like people like me will fawn over it. You keep the bottle sitting in the window there, and you drink the good stuff.
Yeah, we work with a guy, and he's like, if you have $90 of discretionary income and you want to impress people with a bottle of bourbon, Blanton's is a really good choice because it's good and it does that.
Yeah, except unless you're in Alabama, and then you just can't get it because the shelves are bare. We've got Walter Dieters in the chat here saying hello. Hello, Walter. Thanks for attending. I know it's getting late over there for you this evening. So let's talk about Classic Car Stereos a little bit. What made you want to be a merchant? What made you want to start an online-based business?
So I was originally working in corporate America. I was an outside salesman selling connectors for TE connectivity. So I kind of got passed up for what I thought was a promotion, and then was asked to cover the state of Arizona, which was primarily the Phoenix market, remotely from California. So I was 26 years old, flying to Scottsdale every week, living on an expense account, and life was good. Then at the time, they had a change. So the national sales manager took the job in Europe. They brought this new guy in, and he said, "So Jeff, when are you going to move to Arizona?" And I was happily living in California, and I said, "Well, the job was never presented to me that way. So I don't know, I got to think about it." So at the time, we didn't have a commission plan, which was tough. We were on a drop. So I just used that as my way of stalling. at the same time, my dad is in e-commerce and automotive e-commerce, selling all the parts to restore air-cooled Volkswagens. People had come to him with small opportunities for little sites to start. And he said, I just don't have the time to do it anymore. So when they told me I needed to move to Arizona, combined with the, getting passed over on the promotion, it was like one of those. He said, how about I sell you these 3 sites for $1,000 and you can go do it. And I said, okay. I had enough savings, so I decided to become an entrepreneur. We went to SEMA that year. I decided to stay out playing cards and drinking until like 6 a.m. because
as we tend to do at SEMA. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were walking around a booth and my dad was trying to talk to a vendor, which happens to be Custom Auto Sound, one of ours. And the guy was BSing with his buddy for about 45 minutes. Well, in that 45 minutes, we walked their booth. My dad came up with the idea and said, we should start a site and sell these radios. And I said, you don't have time because mom will kill you. So I'm going to do it. So I bought classic car stereos in the McCarran Airport and got to work.
How long ago was that?
That would have been SEMA 2011.
Okay.
And then kind of classic car stereos launched in 2012.
So, 9 years for an e-commerce site is pretty old. It's not ancient, obviously, but definitely a lot of learning experiences over the way. Now, which platform did you launch on? Like that kind of that vintage Magento would have been, a pretty big player, pretty big up-and-coming player for small merchants. Which platform did you go with, and why did you make that decision?
So we are on Miva, and we started on Miva. We've been on Miva the entire time. Primarily, it was by default because that's what my dad's site was built on. And then having worked summers here while in college, I kind of got to learn the back end a little bit. And the guy we used for design and development back then had kind of started what was kind of a theme in today's world back in 2011. And it was, you could easily start up a site. It was probably $20 a month, and you didn't really have to know much. It was just kind of straightforward and simple.
So it was cheap. It was pretty easy. You went with what you knew, right?
Correct. It was
okay.
Primarily by default. It was just, I know how to do this. It's cheap. I can do it easily, quickly, and focus on what I was good at, as opposed to trying to navigate some sort of, software, if you will.
Okay. Now, Miva, we used to do Miva back in the day. Like, we were a Miva shop. I'm trying to remember when that was. That had to be quite a bit before your site was built. Let's say, I want to say 2003, maybe 2004, something like that. Like, Miva's been around for a long time. It's not something... Honestly, I was surprised a few years ago when I started going to conferences and actually saw their booth, because I didn't even know they were still really a thing. And so, apparently they do a lot of automotive e-commerce. Anything in particular that makes them the right fit for you this day? Like to this day, is it just, hey, we're there, we've got it built, or is there any reason that is the platform you're still on?
Part of it is we have it built. What I like about it is it's a SaaS product, so we don't have to deal with hosting or updates, any of the stuff that comes from a Magento. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just, given our volume, I think it's just a better choice for the cost with where we're at.
Sure.
But at the same time, Miva is completely customizable. So we have unlimited, custom fields for products, for categories, for customers, for orders. So depending on what you do with those custom fields, you can do a lot of triggers or a lot of customizations that are wide open. So you almost get the flexibility you get from a Magento store with the convenience of a SaaS product.
That's interesting.
Obviously, there's limitations there, but
of course. That's an interesting point, an interesting thought, because Miva actually does a lot of automotive sites, apparently, which is, makes it even more surprising that I wasn't aware they were still kicking around and doing pretty well. You see so many merchants kind of get mesmerized by shiny objects, whatever the latest buzzword is or whatever. People really think that technology is going to solve their problems and help them grow their business rather than a strategy. And so it's interesting to see a merchant like yourself that, has a platform and continuously improves that platform over pretty much a decade at this point, rather than always being distracted by what's new and next. Do you feel like maybe that is one of the reasons for your success?
I don't necessarily know that it's shiny object syndrome. I think part of it is I'd like to think that my brain, my hard work, and then also our team, that we just create an experience that's better than anyone else. There's good and bad in terms of shiny objects. On other platforms, everything integrates. There's apps, or they have a pre-built connector. So if you see something cool, you can leverage it quickly. One drawback of Miva is a lot of the times those integrations have to be custom built. So, there's some simple things where it's just throw a line of JavaScript in the head, but then there's other things like Yotpo for reviews. When you go to send off that order information to Yotpo, we're not just installing an app or just installing a connector. We have to actually use their API and then run a PHP script on the order invoice page, which then tells Yotpo, this customer bought this. This is all it was. So that send them a review request in 30 days. But all that has to be custom built. Now, I'm probably at a unique advantage in that my dad is in this space too. So he has resources that he needs to run his business. And if he installs Yotpo on his site, I can easily install Yotpo because the developer that installed it for him can easily install it for me. And the amount of work, it's a lot of copy paste.
I understand. So you've got the advantage of having, connections with a slightly bigger player that you can kind of piggyback off of a little bit, right? Like they can kind of take the bulk of the cost of creating new functionality, and then you can, use that to your benefit.
100%.
Okay.
And the other good thing is the ability to learn from the internal resources. We have a developer that I'd say is really smart, and over the past, that's year and a half, really been able to learn a lot of things about site performance, site speed, and then even, content and data structure on even the homepage, category pages, product pages that help long-term sustainability rather than just doing something the way that I would or someone on our content team would, which would be to just, hey, I know how to do this, so let's do it and let's copy paste.
I understand. And it's not an uncommon scenario where you have, I know we worked for a company that owns a lot of brands. And even in that organization, they had the cash cow. They had the one company that, was the bulk of their revenue, that was always pushing the envelope, adding new technology, experimenting, constantly improving their site. And then they would leverage the learnings to, take that to their smaller brands to try to improve those as well. So that's, it's a pretty common scenario. If you have that, it's a great advantage for sure. We've got Walter Dieters in the chat here asking Miva. It's M-I-V-A, Miva. Miva used to be Miva Merchant. I think they may just go by Miva now. Funny story here about Miva. When I was in college, around here at least, Auburn University, Auburn, Alabama, there was actually a debate as to whether or not Miva or PHP was going to be the programming language of the web. Because Miva is kind of its own language. The problem is that the Miva Corporation decided to kind of take it proprietary, and I think they did that because it was slow. But Auburn University was actually writing a ton of their custom applications and websites in Miva. And, Miva decided they would kind of take it proprietary. And I really think what it was is they didn't have the team, the size, the funding to really build out the tooling. So they tried to bring it in-house to where you would have to kind of send it to them to compile things, and then they would provide you back the code. And that was literally, around here at least, what made PHP kind of the de facto language of the web back in those days. That may be a little bit before your time, though.
That was before my time, but it still seems kind of true. There's a lot of stuff that they have currently that they hold close to the vest. But I think part of it is security and, reliability.
Right.
But then also though, it's also a reliance on them. But I think that they're getting away from that, I would say, finally, which is a good thing for people like us.
Absolutely. I've got Hansa in the chat. Hansa, thanks for watching. Appreciate your comments, saying hello. Checking over on YouTube. Willie over on YouTube is asking if anybody's there. A little more conversation going on over on LinkedIn, but this is one of those new types of conversation, new types of talks. So we're not really asking for questions, but if anybody's got any questions, they got any topic, I've got a merchant here. I've talked a merchant into coming on here. We've lubricated their thinking with a little bit of bourbon. So if you've got anything you want to know directly from a merchant, ask the questions. Be absolutely happy to discuss that. Gary Smith over on LinkedIn says compiled Miva was a watershed that concerned a lot of people. Gary was actually on Miva Merchant back in the early 2000s as well. It was a very, very popular platform at one point when there weren't a lot of options out there. And so, it's good to see them still around. But let's talk about kind of future functionality or kind of what's on the market. Is there anything right now? We get technical people on here. They're going to talk about headless e-commerce and progressive web apps and all of this cutting edge stuff, because honestly, cutting edge is what makes us a hell of a lot of money. You want to do something cutting edge, you're going to pay us a fortune to do it. It's fantastic. I have a bunch of developers do it. I make a bunch of money. I can buy some cool cars. It's awesome. I love it. Let's do cutting edge. But for a merchant your size, is there something out there that actually does have you excited? Is there something you're exploring or looking into or thinking about that you don't have currently?
Me personally, not right now. I think when I look at our ecosystem of companies here, one of the things I think that like Magento does well that we're trying to implement on Miva is just a lot better use of caching from a performance standpoint. It's just, we kind of notice, all right, some of this stuff has taken a really long time, and it's not a secret to anyone out there that Google and customers want a faster experience. So how can we, leverage caching to make a better site? And then at the same time with that, it's difficult though, because if you're using any sort of personalization, you have to figure out across every single page or every template you have on your site, okay, what can we cache? What can we not? And where does it make sense is it better to how much personalization is the right amount? It seemed like personalization was like real super popular for 2 or 3 years. And I don't know if it's just the circles I'm running in these days, but it seems like it's not talked about as much. And maybe I'm just not listening to it, or it's because, we have a personalization platform that we're currently using, and I'm not looking for another one, so I'm not really reading about it.
Well, it's
But
not as big a buzz term anymore, right? We got to have buzz term. We got to be selling.
yeah,
We have to always be selling something. It's like a car, right? The new model comes out, it's got something new. If it's just like
yep.
the last year's model, then nobody's going to buy it. So we got to be talking about something new. Personalization. Now it's headless. And in a few years, when that's not a shiny new thing, we'll talk about something else. I mean, you still need to be doing it. It's still out there. It's still, a big topic, but it's, I guess, not a topic. It's still a big thing. But it is one of those things where I don't know if, I believe the hype may have been more than it deserved, but at the same time, it is something important that can lead to more sales. How are you using personalization?
I mean, primarily it's just recommendations, both on product and basket pages, and then we're also able to use the same vendor for email as well. But
Okay.
I mean, a lot of it it's tough because you can spend a lot of time coming up with all these rules to do all these things, but does that really move the needle for you?
Right. I mean, if it doesn't move the needle, what's the purpose?
Because in an automotive standpoint, right, you can move stuff. I guess if I know what vehicle you have, I can move stuff to the homepage and whatnot. But how expensive is that from a data standpoint? How much of your homepage are you caching? And for instance, if you have a Chevy Camaro, so you click, it's 3 clicks. If you have a year, make, model finder, 1, 2,
Right.
3, and boom, everything's going to be for Camaro. Is that really worth it? And is that going to really drive that much? I mean, I don't know. I think if I did know,
go ahead.
If I did know, I sure as hell wouldn't be selling audio for classic cars.
Well, I mean, it's something that could possibly be tested, over a time period, pushing, because the problem is what percentage of your traffic do you actually know when they hit the homepage what their car is?
Like me, no. I mean, we'll
the website, like what percentage of your traffic has a cookie set with their car information when they land on the homepage?
I couldn't even tell you. Probably 0 right now.
Well, I mean, that's something that would be useful to know. And I would think the easiest way, I mean, you could set up some tracking around that probably, but what do you know what percentage of your customers are repeat customers?
It's lower than I want it to be right now.
Okay.
I haven't looked at it to get that granular with it, to be honest.
They obviously came to the site. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I think we got a little bit of a delay, but go ahead.
Probably, our marketing girl, she probably has a better idea than I do, but that's probably a metric I should be tracking. But
yeah,
right now, off the top of my head, I don't know.
It's the freaking marketing people's job. I get it. It's good. So with that, I would think that the only way they would have that set is if they've been to the site before. They may not be a repeat customer, but you don't have that info if they're just a random stranger unless you're running some particular ad and it's auto setting that when they bounce over. So if you're not doing that, then they would have had to have been to the site. And then if they've been to the site and they've set year, make, model, and they've viewed products, I would think in your case, you would get the exact same benefit from just showing them products they've already viewed on the homepage rather than trying to push personalized products, because your products have such a limited subset. Like once I choose, if I'm buying a stereo for my 1963 Chevy Impala, then once I go to the site, I choose 63 Impala, I view the stereos, I click all of them that I'm interested in, I come back to the site. Like, you don't really need to know that I have a 63 Impala. It's useful for some other navigation and stuff, but you don't have to do personalization based on that. You could literally just show me what I've already viewed.
Yeah, just a recently viewed Carousel, and away we go. Which is
I would think it'd be the same thing. That for you, because there's how many do you really sell for a particular car? Like, what are the most options for one car as far as classic car stereos?
If you're going to get into a radio, the most there's 6 options.
Okay. So at most, I've viewed 6 products for that car. Whereas, like, if somebody has 1,000 options that might, like, if I came and I viewed blue shirts, some companies may have like 600 blue shirts they could show me. And so personalization might be a little better because I don't, do you really know that they're looking for blue shirts? Personalization might be able to say, okay, everything they viewed was blue, or everything they viewed was this, or they only looked at shirts. And, personalization could be bigger. But when you've only got 6 products to offer, I would think you could probably get very similar or same results a lot simpler.
Yeah, and it's funny. We actually, on one of my dad's sites, we ran a test with a product carousel on the homepage. It did not win. Or we had it and removed it, and removing the carousel on the homepage won.
Okay, so you had a carousel. I'm kind of reading a couple of the questions here in the chat. You had a carousel on the homepage, and you tested not having a carousel on the homepage.
Removing it just because it was dynamically created. It's dynamically populated. It was popular products, and then if you had viewed products, those viewed products were there, along with a couple other recommended. And then
so you had viewed products, and it didn't work.
Removing the carousel as a whole won.
Now, did it have any sort of negative effects? Did it make the site slower?
We don't know. We weren't really testing it on a pure performance, just from the idea of like the less pictures you load, the faster the site's going to be by default. So A, you're not making a call to the personalization engine. And then B, you're also not loading, 8 different pictures.
Absolutely. And so I'm trying to envision what kind of carousel this was. Was it just like a product carousel where it's got a bunch of different products and it slides left and right? Or are we talking about the big carousel image at the top?
No, it was just products. It actually didn't even scroll. It was just two rows of 4 that then went down to 2 as it got responsive.
Interesting. I would love to see that data. I've got a couple of questions here in the chat. Walter is asking a couple of questions. Now, Walter, I told him he didn't really have to talk numbers. So if you want to answer this, if you want to completely avoid it, I'm okay with that, right? Like that's the deal. So his question was, how big is your company? So you can talk people, you can give a general range, or you could say, no, thank you.
I'd rather not say. We're kind of, okay. I can say in terms of people, if I take, customer service and shipping, 6, and then we have all sorts of shared resources from, on the marketing and website.
Fair to say you're a small business.
Yeah. And there's, I think in 2020, there's part of me that is thinking, like, how big do I really want to get? I've been just, you read Twitter, because I follow a lot of e-commerce people there, and it's like there's sometimes it might be smart to stay small, because how much money do you really need? And I look at them and say there's 2 parts of it. There's financial freedom and there's time freedom. So how does that work for you? And I think you probably work the same way. I know when we met last year at IRCE, you said, well, Jeff, I'm about to take my family on a road trip, down to Southern California.
30 days. Yeah, 30 days we were gone. Now, I was working a lot of those, but it is, the only benefit to growing big is if you're going to sell out. Like, that's really the only huge, unless you're going to get huge, if you want to change the world or whatever, but most of those people really design a business from the ground up to go that big. If you're trying to build a Shopify, that's from the ground up. That's not a merchant trying to build a brand. And so, for me, what I like to do is I like to wake up in the morning and do whatever the hell I want to do. Usually that's work and do stuff and create content and help people and that kind of thing. But I definitely don't need the pressure, because more money, more problems. Like, payroll is already one of those things I don't like too much.
For sure.
All right. So getting through, go ahead.
I forgot what I was going to say. I had
Sorry
something.
about
I
that.
had something profound.
Just a little bit of I ruined it. Just a little bit of a delay there, so I apologize for speaking over you. Just trying to get to Walter's questions. He mentions Hotjar, and he says he sees you're making use of Hotjar on your website. Are you familiar with Hotjar? You know, I didn't know if just the marketing person's using it. How have you found, how useful is it for you?
I mean, I'm not checking it that often. It seems like we're seeing a lot of, the same patterns. When I look at like our higher traffic pages, people are continually doing the same things. If you look at my homepage, you can probably guess where most people are going, because that element we try to, feature. But yes, we do use Hotjar, mostly just like if we see something where it's like, all right, maybe we've had a soft couple of days, throw a heat map on the homepage and let's see, did something change? But we're not really using it that often, at least for my business. For my dad's business, it's all the same account. And I think we use it a little bit more there, but we're also doing significantly more testing, and Hotjar is an important part of that research.
All right. So, Walter's asking you questions around how your customer engagement starts, mobile or desktop. Do you know what percentage of your traffic is desktop versus mobile?
It's like 60% desktop, 40% mobile.
Now you're at an interesting place though, because you're selling car stereos for older vehicles, and most of those older vehicles are going to be owned by older people. And so, do you have a general idea of what the age demographic is for your customer base?
Yeah, I mean, in general, and from what we see, it kind of mirrors suppliers' demographics with what they see with their advertising too. And it's primarily rich men over the age of 50.
All right. So, but what does that spell for the future? Like, is there some way to combat that? Is there some way, like, what happens to all of these older cars? 'Cause I'm seeing, years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, the whole automotive industry was like, oh, okay, how are we going to, at least the aftermarket industry was, how are we going to get kids involved in cars? Because kids don't care anything about cars. And now you're seeing all of this YouTube culture emerge. A lot of the JDM stuff, a lot of the 90s cars are really starting to become popular. Drifting is getting more and more popular. And so we're starting to see a car culture emerge. But what happens to the really old classics? What happens to the complete steel built cars, where they're not half plastic?
I think that's, if you say like things that I think about that could keep me up at night. I think that's one of them, but at the same time, a classic is born every day, and we're seeing people start to restore newer, more late model cars. And for instance, like at SEMA this past year, you saw people are starting to restore the, like 88 to 97 Chevy trucks.
Right.
So the generation past square body, now people want those. And I think, I look at myself, I'm about to be 36 years old. Those were the trucks that my friends had when I was in high school. So I think what happens is, it just, as people get older, it's just the cars that they remember that they're nostalgic about, they're just going to keep moving with that. But then I also think there seems to be like this culture of like old is cool. So there are a lot of people that still want like old cars, and like a 57, I don't see where like a Tri-5 Chevy is never not cool to anyone, because it's just a beautiful automobile.
Right.
So yeah, I think like that is one of, the threats. And then you say, okay, so how do you take what we do right now, which a tuner shaft radio stopped in 1987, It's like, okay, so what are we going to do for those Chevy trucks, the 88 to 98?
Now, some of those had like the split. They had like split units, right? Didn't they have like the separate little cassette player, and then they had like the radio as one, or you've got like the mid '90s Ford Taurus. You know, my brother-in-law's got an SHO that he loves. It's got like the football style radio in it. So, you know, when you start getting to those eras, though, it gets interesting. So how do you support that?
I would say today I don't know, but I'm also looking at, trying some other things, and one of them is like getting into marine audio.
Right.
So how do you expand outside of classic car stereos and take some of the suppliers and vendors we have and then move into other kind of niche markets? So yes, I own www.marinestereo.com. It's pretty new, and I'm trying to figure out how to launch it. Somewhat taking your advice from Chicago, which is build your site and then produce the content to drive traffic, and then start paying ads, start then running your ads so that you at least have a customer base instead of just trying to spend, and then you end up with this. You never get ahead of yourself because you spend all this time trying to service the customers you paid for, and you're not getting free traffic, which is one of the other threats. Is like free traffic's getting harder and harder to get, because
I think that's the only way to build a small business these days, is a sustainable small business, is to build your own influence. Like literally, you should be the marine audio guy. Like you've got to start up a YouTube channel. You've got to start, Pinterest boards. You've got to start, an Instagram account, and you've got to be putting out marine audio content. That is literally the only way long term, because all of those traffic sources that you pay for are only getting more competitive and more expensive. And what's going to happen, though, is that something new is going to emerge. And a lot of the traffic that goes to Facebook, that goes to Instagram, goes to the new thing. And then, so you're paying for ads that are getting more expensive, but you're getting less traction on them. So the traction's going to go down. The price is going to continue to rise because they got to, they're publicly traded companies, most of them.
For sure.
And you got to keep those numbers up. And the only way, if the traffic's going down and they're not showing the ad to as many people, they got to make more money off of them. And so, yeah, you've got to be looking for what that new thing is, but you also have to be trying to build your own influence. And that's through newsletters. That's through, social accounts. Like you've got to be out there kind of fighting for every view that you can get to drive traffic over to whatever it is you're trying to sell.
Yeah, that's what we're trying. I mean, that's what part of what I'm trying to do. Easier said than done, but yes.
All right, so I've got Walter in the chat giving us a hard time here. He says, the most important brand is missing from your website, and that's Saab.
I wish I don't know, honestly, enough about Saab, but at the same time, most of the European vehicles use the same template. So usually the Volkswagen radio will fit classic Saabs. If not, as long as the opening is at least 1.5 inches tall, 3.5 inches wide, and the knob spacing is at least 5 1/4, no more than 7 3/4, we can do it.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Walter's over in the Netherlands, so he's apparently a Saab fan. I've actually, you kind of mentioned, some of the newer cars becoming classics. I've actually got a Volkswagen Corrado out there that we finally got running. I've still got a little bit of work to do on it, windshield replacement, and I'm going through the power windows at this point. But, that's a car that long term, growing up, I never would have looked twice at. Like, I wouldn't have been interested in that car at all. But now, just to see a factory-produced supercharged four-cylinder from the early 90s, it just struck me, right? It's just unique. It's just different. And that's one of those cars where as we grow older, you can't get a new car like that. It's just so
No.
different. Little 5-speed transmission, tiny little car. It's just a lot of fun. Well, I mean, I say it's a lot of fun. It'll be a lot of fun if I ever get to drive it. The problem with Corrados is a lot of people will tell you that Corrado is Spanish for to run. But Corrado owners will tell you that Corrado is German for disappointment. Because that's all that car is a big ball of disappointment.
Well, I know a lot of people like them though, because if they didn't have the supercharged 4-cylinder, that little car had a 6-cylinder in it.
Yeah, the VR6, the SLCs. Yeah, from what I hear, again, I've got this one running. I haven't been able to drive it yet. I'm still working out a couple of little issues. The VR6 is a good bit more horsepower stock than the G60, but the G60 is actually a little more fun to drive from what I hear, just because the balance is a little better on it. I don't really care to go fast though. I've put some coilovers on this thing. I've put some wide BBS wheels and I've slammed it to the ground so I can relate to the whippersnappers out there. Just want to look cool. That's all I care about is looking cool.
You got stance.
Well, we're not going to camber it. I can't go that far. I can't be that guy. I can't do it, man. I can't. And these wheels that I bought them used, and somebody had them on a little Golf, and they slammed them to the ground, and they had a little camber on them, and I'm like, I can't bring myself to do it. It just looks broken to me. For those that are watching that have no idea, like we're having a car conversation. The people, this is an e-commerce channel. Camber is where the kids these days will take their wheels and they'll lean them like this, or they do whatever they want. But they lean them like this, and they're like riding on the edge of the tire because I don't know why. There's no because. I don't know the answer to that. I'm apparently too old for that trend. I don't know. I guess they just want it to look broken. Like, I can understand a little bit. Like, my rear wheels on that car are 9 inches wide. That's a little, like, the wheel's a little wider than the wheel well. And so, like, I could see a little camber on that one so that I could tuck it up underneath the wheel well, but then I'd have to roll the lip, and I'm just not doing that to my car. I just can't. I got to draw the line somewhere. I just won't be. If that's what it takes to be cool, I just won't be cool. Walter's throwing words over here in the chat, but that I can't say. I'm not going to say on the live stream. But apparently, Walter agrees that the G60 is the superior car. And yes, Walter, it does have the G ladder supercharger, which I found out the hard way. This is what Let me tell you the story real quick of this. I mean, we're going to waste half the live stream on a Corrado, but a friend of mine had this car. I had never seen one. I didn't even know what it was. I come from a small town. We didn't have Corrados. Nobody had a Volkswagen unless they had a Beetle. And so a friend of mine had this sitting in his yard, and this was a car that meant a lot to him. He and his wife went on their first date on it. Like, he had it forever, and the fuel pump went out, and he left it sitting, and it sat for years and years and years. He was going to get to it. He's going to get to it. Then the timing belt tensioner went out and all that stuff, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And so I saw it, and I was like, man, what is that? And he showed it to me. I was like, dude, I'd like to have this. What do you want for it? He didn't want to sell it. A couple of years later, he's like, you still want that Corrado? And I was like, yeah, I'd like to have it. And he's like, okay. He's like, I have no idea what to sell it for, but it's a mess. Just know it's a mess. And I was like, okay. It's a Volkswagen. It's not gonna be that expensive. Like, parts will be readily available. It's easy to work on. It's a Volkswagen. This is no problem. I was very naive. I bought the car, got a decent price for it. Based on the body is perfect on the car, but it had been setting for the better part of a decade. I found out, and so everything's wrong. Like, I've had to replace the fuel tank, the fuel pump, all the fuel lines. We upgraded fuel injectors, rebuilt the fuel harness, fuel pressure regulator, distributor cap, plugs, wires. I had to replace the G ladder supercharger, which I found out the hard way, that I can buy a Corrado without the supercharger cheaper than I can buy the supercharger without the Corrado. Okay, so I ended up just buying a whole nother car for the supercharger. But the good thing is I got a good deal on that second car because somebody had just stripped it down to paint it and never put it back together. So I got a good deal on it, and I ended up getting like $2,000 worth of parts because again, found out the hard way, you can't get parts for a Corrado. Nobody makes new parts for a Corrado. The engine, fine. The engine was used on quite a few Volkswagens. Every body part on the Corrado is made for the Corrado, and they changed several of them when they hit the VR6. So only the G60, they only imported 15,000 of them to the U.S. throughout the whole 5-year run. So, going a little bit of a rant there, but if anybody's looking for a Corrado, don't do it unless you just like pain. But I do need a stereo. I got the factory radio. I'm going to drop back in it. It's got one of those detachable face Alpine units or something that just doesn't work anymore if you pop the face back in. But it's a single DIN unit. I'm going to pop the factory radio back in there and then maybe add a secret audio or some Bluetooth connections or something. I just want to be able to turn the button on, control the volume with the radio, and then play it from my phone.
Yep. Just connect it to an amplifier and they're good to go.
Yeah.
And they all take high level inputs now, so just take your 4 speaker wire connections into the amp.
And then just be good to go.
Yep.
I'll have to check that out. I've got it.
You can figure it out. There's so many different ways to do it. You can put things in between. You can use Bluetooth adapters, what have you, but yeah, it's not that bad.
Okay. I've got an amp. I've got an amp and some speakers in my Super B. I'm going to take out and put one of the subs in the Corrado and the amp, and then run all the rest of the speakers off of that. That's what I was thinking. I'll hit you up when I'm ready, though. Figure that out.
Question for you is, what do you see as threats or opportunities for someone like myself? We talked about the Google opportunity thing.
Well, the funny thing is we're going to go back to kind of emerging technology a little bit. But I think threat-wise, if you're getting organic traffic, Google's always a threat. They're continuing to incentivize mobile friendliness. They're not always real clear about, they're like, hey, your site needs to be fast, but they don't really tell you so much how fast it has to be. There's still a lot of slow sites that rank. That's always a big threat. Anytime you've got one source of income or one source of traffic, that is dominating, that's a threat. PPC is a big threat. How expensive is that going to be? Because anytime you've got companies like Casper that will pay for an ad and lose $30 or $40 million a year because they just know in 5 years they're going public. Companies that can run on a negative are really, really bad, especially if they're competing for the same ad space as somebody else. They're really bad for small merchants. Opportunity-wise, I still think there's a ton of opportunity in mobile. I think there's a ton of opportunity in content and building influence. I don't see a lot of businesses that are actually trying to relate to their customer through content. I think PWA is a buzz term. I'm not saying jump out there on a PWA right now, but the theory behind being able to create content and then use a mobile app experience to push that content out to your audience and relate to them, I think for a lot of businesses is going to be a game changer once some of them figure it out. Just you being in control of the relationship with your customer. Because a lot of businesses either rely on Amazon, so you don't really have control over that customer. They're relying on Facebook traffic, so once they turn into a customer, you have a relationship you can mine, but you don't really control the source of traffic. And so I think small businesses have to fight more and more to what I call build their influence, and it's really just making sure they have a medium by which they are regularly communicating with customers and potential customers.
Makes sense.
Yeah. It's, how you do that's a different thing. Like for you, for instance, let's talk about you for a little bit. You're selling stereos. Like how many times, if I buy a stereo and I install it in my 63 Impala, which I'm going to have to do at some point. I've got a 63. It's about finished. I got to put a stereo in it. But how many more stereos am I really going to buy as an end consumer? Now, if I'm building cars or I'm doing something like that, or if I'm a stereo shop, that may be some opportunity there. But, how do you build a relationship with customers that very likely may only buy once in their lifetime?
I mean, I think that's one of the challenges. And I look at that and say, okay, you essentially have to either squeeze as much juice out of the lemon as you can that one time you got it, or then it's like, okay, what other complementary products can we offer these people? And those are things we're thinking about. Like, the hard part for us is that stereo, like you've got your 63 Impala, but you haven't bought a stereo for it yet. When are you going to buy your stereo? When are you going to buy it? The very end, usually.
Yeah, I mean, the car is almost done. Like, I'm literally going to have the car driving it without a radio in it. Now, my case is special because we've covered the hole where the radio would go. So we've got a custom console. We'll do something a little fancier. We're not going to put the old school radio. But yeah, like we have it. The car it literally needs, long story, but I've got to replace the front spindles and get some disc brake brackets, which are in the mail on the way, and the car's done. That is literally the last thing to have the car finished, and we haven't even thought about stereo.
I know, and that's one of the challenges that we face is your car is going to be done. You're going to say, I need nothing else for this car but a stereo. So part of it is you're a car guy. So you've got whatever you drive every day. You've got your 63 Impala. You have your Corrado too. So how do we?
And a few more we won't talk about, but yeah.
Yeah, your wife may be listening.
Yeah.
But so we got to somehow create an experience that is so memorable that you say, I'm going to call them back and see if they have something for my Corrado, or find out what other products we can sell you after the fact when you've already bought everything for your vehicle. And it's a challenge. That's hard. And how do we do it? Like, that's one of the things that, I work on a day-to-day basis. Does it come down to detailing products? Because if you restore a classic car, chances are you're going to take it to a car show. And what are you going to do at that car show? You're going to spray it with some sort of quick detailer and wipe it down so it looks pretty. So, one of the things we think about is, okay, if we can sell detailing products, then post-purchase, you've already bought your radio. Hey, when you take it to a car show, here we have a bundle of detailed products, and buy it, keep your car looking nice, to try to increase that customer lifetime value. Buzzword.
Buzzword. It's an important buzzword, though, especially if you're paying for traffic. If you end up offering detail products, are you going to take something that's off the shelf? You're going to take, Chemical Guys products, or maybe something that's not quite as direct to consumer, and you're going to offer those products, or you're going to try to build your own?
I mean, I think it would make sense to buy somebody, resell somebody else's, at least to start, because I would be jumping into a pool that I know nothing about other than my own experience, which is Meguiar's, which you can get anywhere, and probably not the best fit for what we would want to do.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. That's an interesting thought. And I've got a few comments here. I'm just making sure nobody has mentioned something that we need to touch on. Just some folks telling me Sam over here on YouTube is telling me my credibility has gone up after I started talking about Corrados. Apparently my cool factor has increased. Wait till you see it on its BBS 15x9 BBS wheels, slammed to the ground on some coilovers, but a topic for another time. So with this, though, it's an interesting thought. Like, the fact is that they've got a classic car. You know what classic car they have. You then know what they're going to do with it, right? Like they're putting a nice stereo in it, so they're going to drive it. They're going to take it to shows. They're going to take it to cruise-ins. So can you sell car covers? Can you sell, wheels possibly that, maybe they want to upgrade, maintenance products for that car, or like you said, kind of car care products. Can you sell WeatherTech floor mats? Stuff that maybe they also don't think about until the very, very end of a build. That's an interesting thought that I hadn't really considered for your market.
Yeah, I think there's Dakota digital gauges, and you say, well, can you sell them in the sense of like, well, it's in the same realm as a dash. That's something that's designed to look old, but it's brand new. But the hard part is has that person already thought of and purchased their gauges? Like do you already have gauges for your Impala?
Yeah, the gauges in the dash are the Dakota Digital, was it VHX style, which are kind of digital but kind of not? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so we have an account with Dakota Digital, but that's one of the challenges. You say, okay, it's very similar, but we have to get that person where, as we would say, they're smart and intelligent, and they're buying all of their stuff before they need it as opposed to when they need it. Right. But yeah, that's one of the hard parts of selling a durable good that is really late in the customer journey.
How do you bridge that gap though? Because it's one of those where you're niche down, and that's good. Like you can be the car stereo guy, and now how do you become the car stereo and detailing products guy? Like, is it the same umbrellas? Is it the same brand? Do you what's the ethics behind moving them to another mailing list or another contact point for a whole different brand that is the car detailing guy? Like, how do you make that transition?
See, I don't know. To me, I think the ethics there of like creating a whole other site to do it wouldn't make sense. But I also look at someone like Movement Watches that's out there, and their primary business is watches. They also sell, sunglasses, blue light glasses, other things like that, which it's kind of a complementary product as an accessory. At least myself, like if I were to go buy new sunglasses, Movement probably would not be on a list of brands I was checking out. Right. Would they? I don't know.
On the flip side of that, they're a brand, right? They're kind of manufacturing these products.
True.
So they started off as watches, but they're a brand. So they're just selling what they manufacture. So it's not like where they sell you a watch and then a week later or a month later they start emailing you about, hey, this guy likes watches, let's sell him a belt. They are Movement. They still, so, if you're classic car stereos, that's fine. If you're, Jeff Vogl, if you're Vogl classic car stuff, that's a little different because you're not as niche down. And you can kind of, you may sell all sorts of parts. So I'm just kind of interested because niching, I think, is the right way to start a business. But then how do you break out of that? That's a very interesting question.
Yeah, I would say today I don't have the answer or the solution in how to do that profitably. I think it'd be super easy to if we weren't bootstrapped, but in order to go do that, as I talked earlier though, is going to do that worth the time, effort, and money? Part of it is, a sustainability game where you have to constantly be doing something to drive more revenue per customer, especially as ad costs are going to increase. But I would love to be Crutchfield. I don't think there isn't anyone that wouldn't want to be Crutchfield. But at the same time, like, is that realistic? And do I want to is that going to really make me happy? I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty happy right now. So there's part of it that's like, yeah, I want to, protect what I have and try to make this run hopefully until the day I die, because I really like what I'm doing, and I don't see why I would ever want to stop unless I somehow get a lot better at golf.
And we've gone about an hour and 6 minutes, so we're a little bit over. I appreciate the time. I got one more thing for you, though. You kind of mentioned several times, just happiness, small business, enjoying what you're doing. Is that the goal? Is to just try to, can we sustain the business, grow small or grow slowly, grow by small increments? Or do you want to do something else? Like, what does the future hold for you?
I mean, I would say I would love to make more money. I think the hardest thing, and one of the more memorable things I remember my dad telling me, is I was like 22, graduating college, and he said, "Jeff, where do you want to be in 5 years?" And I came up with something else, some line of where I wanted to be. And I said, "Dad, where do you want to be in 5 years?" And he said, "Happy." And since then, it's kind of like, where do I want to be in 5 years? Happy. Part of the problem is what does happy look like 5 years from now? I don't know. I would say if I looked at where I was 5 years ago and where I am today, I probably would say I couldn't imagine it. Like, I've been incredibly blessed. So if obviously I'd like to continue to improve, just because I like to learn and grow, and increased financial freedom would mean hopefully an easier life for my kids down the road. But at the same time, like, we don't know, what's coming. And I think, like, the unfortunate event with the helicopter crash is a perfect example of that. Like, make sure you're doing what makes you happy now, and strive for happiness, because at the end of the day, if you're not happy, is it really worth it?
Completely agree, and I don't think I could find a better note to end the stream on. So I appreciate everybody for watching. Again, not as talkative of a crowd today, but this wasn't a topic that elicited a lot of Q&A and a lot of questions. So a little different, but if you're watching, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button. It really helps us spread these out. If you like this type of conversation, I've got 2 more of these planned. I've got 2 more merchants coming on. One that I think is even smaller than Jeff's business here. I think they're really kind of just getting started. Local, they're serving their local market, a butcher shop. So it's going to be kind of interesting. And then I'm bringing on a developer for a larger B2B company. I say larger, mid-size, small to mid-size B2B distribution company. And so we're gonna have some interesting streams over the next several weeks. I enjoy this type of conversation, the insight, the expertise. Everybody, with their experiences has a lot to add to this conversation. And so I like these types because, there's been a lot of just kind of division in the e-commerce community lately. There's a lot of, naysayers, a lot of negative talks on Twitter. You can't be a fan of 2 platforms. Everybody's got their favorite, and if you don't agree with them, you're just an idiot. And that's just stupid. Like, it's just stupid, and I don't understand why we have to be this way. And I like having somebody come on that just doesn't give a damn. There's nobody they're not owned by anybody. They're not afraid to say this is good, this is bad. Be honest with folks, and just have a good, honest conversation. So I want to thank Jeff for coming on and being the first. The first is always scary. So, Jeff, if anybody has any questions, how or they want to buy a car stereo for something other than their 90 Volkswagen Corrado, how do they get in touch with you?
So our website is classiccarstereos.com. Stereos is plural. And then you can email me at jeffv@classiccarstereos.com, or I hang out on Twitter at Jeff_Vogl. That's VOGL.
Yeah, I added you on Twitter. I can't believe we weren't already connected on Twitter. So I actually followed you today. So now we are good to go there. I appreciate everybody watching, and I will see you guys again next week on Thursday. I'll put it out there as to what time, but we're going to be live again next Thursday. I've got an interesting stream tomorrow. We're going to stream with Mark William Lewis. I'm the big commerce guy. I don't know how that happened, but he's got a Magento guy, a Shopify guy, and a big commerce guy. And we're going to just kind of debate the platforms a little bit. So check out Mark William Lewis. I have no idea where he's streaming that at. Just look for it. It can't be that hard to find. So I appreciate everybody watching, and I'll see y'all next week.